These are 5 reasons that I think your spending should not just increase, but explode as you reach 60 and older. I've been a financial advisor for over 20 years. And one of the saddest things that I've seen is when people sacrifice their entire life. They've done a great job of saving, they've put off things, they have a list of things that they'd like to do, and then as they get close to being able to do those, they start postponing it. Well, we're going to do it next year. You know, we want to start off our retirement cautious. We want to start off our 60s cautious. And this note is not just for people about to retire. Whether you're 5 months away from retirement or 5 years, I think these principles apply. So these people have put off doing the things that they want to do, and then unfortunately, one of them comes down with a health issue, maybe a cancer diagnosis, or they have a heart attack, or a stroke. And oftentimes, if they're married, their spouse ends up being their caregiver. And if the spouse that's the caregiver was the one that was pushing to say, hey, we always said we were going to do these things, and the other spouse is dragging their feet and saying, yes, honey, I hear you, but let's start off conservative. We don't want to run out of money, right? I think, yes, we need to be worried about running out of money, but equally important, we also need to worry about running out of health and running out of time and not having the time that we need in order to enjoy things. And that spouse that ends up being the caregiver, unfortunately, sometimes can feel resentful towards the other spouse who is saying, oh, we'll do it next year, or, you know, we need to start off retirement slowly. So there can be some resentment, and that's really, really hard. So that's number one. Number two is you're spending, even if your spending explodes in your 60s, it's not likely going to stay that high. We've seen, as financial advisors, we've all seen it. We have a term that we call it the retirement smile, where early in the retirement, people spend more money, right? They have the trips, the things that they've always wanted to do, and then they start to slow down. They say, hey, you know, it'd be fun to spend more time with the grandkids, or they pick up a hobby of gardening or mountain bike riding, whatever it is that doesn't have to be expensive. And then the reason there's the other side to the smile is because, unfortunately, none of us know from a healthcare standpoint what our costs are going to be. But early in retirement, it's okay to spend more money because it's not going to stay that high. So if you forecast that out and say, gee, I can't afford to spend this kind of money for 30 years, that's a good thing to know. And kudos for you for having planned. But I think it's also important to plan that your spending is going to decrease. And if you want to have a feel for about what that is going to look like, multiple studies have shown that people 55 to 64 tend to spend about $70,000 a year household spending. And then 65 to 74, that goes down to 55,000. And then 75 plus, that goes down even further to 50,000. Now, I'm not saying these numbers are right for you, but I am saying that you're likely going to see that decrease. So, you know, I'd rather somebody err on the first couple years of spending more money rather than to err on not doing the adventures that they wanted to do and just assume that because you're healthy now, you have lots of time to do things. Okay, that's the second reason. The third reason is, and people don't like when I say this, but I think folks need to hear this. At 60 years old, most of us have less than 1,000 weeks of healthy, active time remaining. That's not a lot of time. And those first couple years of retirement are likely going to be our healthiest, our most active, when we have our full mental acuity. We're excited about this new phase of our life. So we want to take advantage of that passion that comes with the trigger. Getting to the 1,000 weeks, the World Health Organization reports, yes, the good news is we're all living longer, but the bad news is if you're an American, your likely healthy lifespan, not your lifespan, but your healthy lifespan before you get a serious illness, a serious diagnosis, is only 13 months past 65. It's 66.1 years. And most people retire at 65, so that gives them 13 months. Now, if you're planning on retiring at 65, I think it's even more important that you hit the ground running. You have a list of things to do. And so I think as you're preparing, some of the things to do as you're thinking about preparing is first have a plan. Know how much money you have, know how much money you're likely going to have whenever you retire is. And then I suggest, switching from being a saver to a spender is not an easy thing to do. And for most people, it's easier to transition. And the transition would go from being a saver to maybe try a couple years where you're not saving money, or at least a couple months, 6 months where you're not saving money, and you're trying to spend all the money that you're making on things that bring you joy and happiness in your life. Not necessarily on stuff, in fact, likely not on stuff, but more experiences, adventures, activities with family and friends. So the first step is to transition from a saver to just somebody that's neutral. And then the next step is to actually start dipping into your savings. And it can be hard. One of the hardest things about retiring is, if you think of the analogy of a river, and this river is the income coming into your life. And as long as you keep working, if you overspend on some activities, it's less of a big deal, because there's always more money that you can take out of the river of money that's flowing through your life. But when we retire, we step onto the shore, and we're no longer in this river of income. So if we overspend on one thing, it means we have less money later, right? What's in our lake is, if I can stay with the water analogy since I'm on the shore here, what's in our lake of water, what's in our lake of retirement savings is likely all the money that we're ever going to have. And so that can lead to a feeling of frugality, and that's just normal. And one of the things that can be super helpful to help get you past this feeling of frugality, there's a great book. I was planning on writing a book like this, but Bill Perkins, who's the author of this book, did a much better job on this book than I ever can, so I'm not going to write this book. It's called Die with Zero. And I think it's a fabulous book that talks about how we get more joy and more utility out of our money when we're younger, because there's more things that we can do. We can enjoy it more. Imagine traveling when you're 90, and there's a lot of aches and pains. You have some health issues. There's a lot of hassles involved in that. You might be wheelchair bound. There's a lot of things that you can't do. You can't be footloose and fancy free, at a minimum, likely because of some health issues that we're going to have. So Bill would argue, come up with not just a bucket list, but a life list by age. What are the things that you'd like to do? And given the time that you have, when's the best time to do it? For instance, I wanted to learn to surf. And I'm very glad I learned to surf in my 50s, my early 50s. Because when you get tossed off the board, you're tumbling under the water, and it takes a little bit of flexibility. Unfortunately, back then I was doing yoga and I had enough flexibility. And now that I'm better at surfing, I know how to pick the right days. I'm less likely to get tumbled as hard in the wave. So there's certain things that you can do in your 60s that are going to be a lot harder to do in your 70s or 80s. So come up with a list. Maybe the surfing is in your 50s. In your 60s, maybe it's skiing. I'm just making stuff up. In your 70s, maybe it's golf and fly fishing, but where it takes less physical strength, physical ability, in order to do the things. So come up with that list and make sure that you take advantage of it. Because what I've seen is about 80% of people tend to be too frugal. They are likely going to look back and say, and I hear this a lot, I wish I had spent more money. I wish I had taken better advantage of what I call the youth of my senior years. So that's 80% of people. And then another 20% spend too much. And that's a different set of challenges for outside of this video. I should say, none of this is financial advice for you. I don't know your situation, but I want to put some things on your radar screen for you to think about. And the whole idea of hitting the ground running and being ready to take full advantage of the youth of your senior years is key. If you like this video, it's why I made this video up here talking about what's the right age to retire. It's called Retiring at 65, why that might be a big mistake. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.